Hey everyone, welcome back to Life Unpotted. This is Sophie here.
And this is Daisy.
We are excited for another conversation to chat. And I have something specific on my mind today that's been showing up time after time again the past few weeks. And it's the topic of empathy, specifically in regard to relationships that we have with other people in this life as we're on the journey of healing and doing the work, and maybe being around other people who aren't there yet, or who struggle to express themselves, or who set up walls and boundaries that get in the way of conversing and being able to really connect with one another. So a main point for me has been how much I struggle sometimes to have empathy because I get triggered and I get hurt in situations, and how that hurt sometimes keeps me from being able to move forward and remember, oh, we're on the same team here. We both love each other. You know, whether that's your partner, your friend, your family, it's just so easy for these emotions to come up and for them to get in the way of connection. And as we know, connection in this life is the most important thing. And I can just see how a lack of empathy can really get in the way of having meaningful connections. So I'm excited for this conversation. I think it's a very important topic, and kick it to Daisy to continue the conversation.
So I think just to broaden it from looking at it as empathy within interpersonal relationships and really just looking at interpersonal relationships. And to look at it simply, it's the makeup of two separate people. So when you look at that, there's one person who has their own relationship to their self, their own inner world, their relationship to their emotions. And then there's the other person who has their own relationship to their emotions, inner world, and to themselves. So when you take those two people, they might drastically interact differently because they have different inner worlds, or they might interact similarly because they have similar relationships to their emotions. So I think where you're getting at is maybe you interact with someone your entire life on a similar playing field of you don't know your emotions, you don't know how to take care of your emotions, or you're just not as aware of them. Like, it's not a bad thing. I like to use myself as an example because I have a lot of the times not been aware of my emotions, and it's something that I've had to actively learn to do, and it's possible for everyone to do, but there is a direct impact it has on, of course, your relationship to everything, but especially relationships. So if you take that example and you start to learn to have a different relationship with yourself and with your emotions, you may start to see a disparity in how you're used to connecting in certain relationships that you've always been on the same playing field. So ultimately, it starts with your relationship to yourself. And once you start to have a better relationship with understanding your emotions and how they impact you, that's going to carry over into your relationships. And there has to be a level of patience and understanding as having been that person, because the gift of learning how to understand your emotions is that the people you love in your life the most, you know, it's never your responsibility to fix anyone else, but it can be so helpful to have a loved one who's like, hey, you know, you said this and it made me feel this way. Whereas maybe you would never have that kind of conversation if you weren't aware of it yourself. So you get to make others aware of it, that they have the power to express themselves as well, that they have a right to know how they feel and share that. So it's a really important topic because it can totally impact your quality of life, your relationship to yourself and your relationship to others. Like, that's such a huge indicator of your quality of life, is how good of a relationship can you have with yourself and how good of a relationship can you have with others.
So what I'm thinking a lot about is conflict, and how recently we're really on this journey now of getting to know myself more and getting to understand my inner world and the ways in which I get triggered by other people and I feel hurt and I feel frustrated. And recently learning a lot when conflict has come up with friends or family, and having that awareness to then go, okay, wait, here's how I would want to handle it in the past, in my early 20s, probably my teenage years, and honestly, how I handled relationships probably until the past year or so, or past few years, which was get defensive. For example, why did that person say that? They are such a bitch, or they clearly don't understand, or what's wrong with them. Like they clearly are not thinking about other people. Like to react in a very aggressive and defensive way. A really, really, really big takeaway I've had recently is when you react during conflict, you are creating more conflict. You're adding literally more fire to the fire. And I just want to recognize and acknowledge, like, it's really, 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 really hard when somebody is pissing you off and you feel hurt, just to experience all that tension, and to still look at that person and go, can you tell me a little more about how you feel? Like for me, it's like this giant wall comes up where I want to run away. I don't want to talk to the person. And I want to create all these stories that this person's a certain way. And I just see how, like, when you do that, you're just shutting out the ability to work through the conflict and to really work through situations. And that's been a really big lesson I've learned in life the past few years and in my relationship, just learning how to work through disagreements and conflict. And the reason I think this matters is because when you work through conflict, you can really deepen your relationship with the other person. And alternatively, resentment builds. All of a sudden, there's so much tension between you and this person because you never expressed how you felt and you weren't able to really work through the situation. So I think a big takeaway for me right now is just kind of like, when those situations happen and you feel frustrated and hurt, allow yourself the time to reflect on that to yourself and to acknowledge, okay, I am hurt right now. And that's a real emotion. And then I think once you kind of go through that feeling, the space opens up to be like, okay, wait, what is this person going through? Oh, maybe they're having a really, really, really bad day. Maybe they're really hurt, or in the past they've been really hurt or taken advantage of, and for that reason they simply don't know how to express themselves. The ability to go beyond your anger and your frustration and your hurt is so powerful because it allows you to really remember, oh, all anyone wants is love. All anyone wants is connection. But when you're dealing with a bunch of people who were never taught that, it takes effort. And what it takes, which is like the hardest thing to do in life sometimes, is to be the bigger person. Even when you're hurt, even when you're mad, to put that aside and say, hey, I want to work through this with you because I love and I care about you.
Well, the ability to do that all starts like with yourself and your ability to do that for yourself. Because if you can fill your cup up more, where you're able to take care of your feelings and your emotions more, have more awareness of your needs more, as soon as you're able to have just generally more awareness of what you need and you get better at filling that, you're less likely to get stuck thinking about yourself. You're less likely to get stuck fixating on the hurt that you have or you're carrying or the frustration from an experience that happened. And you can sit with that and you can give yourself what you need and you can then move on. And the way I see that is quite literally like filling your cup up. So you have a full cup. So you have more than enough water for yourself. So you can share that with others because you have the capacity. And I don't really think you can really have the capacity to be there for others or to simply hold space, not even like do anything, but just hold space or to explain, unless you've done that for yourself. It's just the classic example of when you're getting on an airplane and they say that you must put the oxygen mask on yourself before a child or someone next to you who needs help. Because you have to always take care of yourself first in order to be able, like you said, to quote unquote be the bigger person, to lead by example, really, is what it is, because it really shows like no one is really a bad person. If you look at your life, you look at your circle, you look at the people in your life, most of the time people are not bad people. And I would go as far to say like no one is a bad person. They're just operating from extreme hurt and unawareness of that hurt and unawareness of how to handle that So the step to take care of themselves is missed, and that causes them to take actions that you see as hurtful or that would make them a bad person. So being able to be aware of your own self is a gift because it allows you to be that person, to show someone else that they don't have to keep themselves in their own suffering. Because a lot of the time, suffering just comes from, in my experience, just not being able to express yourself, not being heard by someone else. A lot of the times, so many problems go away when you just are able to express yourself and you feel heard. Like, that's so many problems, at least within like relational dynamics, whether it's partner, family, friends. So I think, first of all, it's always comes back to taking accountability for yourself. And that's that's a process. But to be able to be a lit match and to help someone else see that and to someone else see that, like it's an ever flowing ripple of decreasing suffering, because so much of suffering comes from isolating yourselves and being cut off from others, lacking connection. Something that was shocking for me to learn, especially from learning in a relationship, learning how to express myself, learning that it's an option for me to express myself, that I can be heard and I can learn to meet my own needs, and all of the stuff that comes with learning to be in a relationship, is you relearn how to connect with people. And maybe the way you internalized or you learned to connect with people was one in which that wasn't safe or it wasn't comfortable. And I think this is a majority of people, like relearning what it means to connect with people, moving that baseline way down, understanding what it means to be heard. And I think that ultimately we all want to just be connected to those who we love. We wouldn't hold people in our life if we didn't want a true connection. And the beauty of doing your work on yourself is that you can forge those connections with those people in your life that you love, because you can lead by example. Because someone has to do it in order to change the way of connection. And it just makes for more enjoyment of just being able to enjoy other people and just everyone to be happy, everyone to be more connected, because connection is so vital. It's so vital. And there's so many different levels of connection, of what we think connection is. And like, we are all craving a deep level of connection. So the deeper we get connected to ourselves, it's so exciting to get to bring that into other meaningful relationships and to redefine what connection is.
So I think a big thing I'm realizing right now is kind of like the difficulty of expressing yourself. And really what I'm realizing is like how many people in my life, I look back and I realize I didn't really have I had a connection with them, but we did not build a language to communicate and to express ourselves. That was something maybe you only do with your partner, if you even get there in your relationship. But I see now, like in order to have a real relationship with a friend or a family member or anybody, if you want to get closer to that person and really have a more meaningful connection where you're not just skating around the surface and never saying how you feel and just agreeing with the other person. Like, I think of my friends in my 20s, just like not deep. Like, the connections are not deep. And I think I'm just at a point now where I realize that like there's a lot of people that I love and a lot of people that I care about and a lot of potential with other people for deep connection, that in order to have that, I have to let go of the way in which I've related to people in the past. Because it's a two-way street always. And I think sometimes like it's really easy to get mad at other people that we don't look to ourselves and go, what stories am I creating in this moment? This person said one thing and now I hate them. Like, what stories am I creating? How much am I caught up in my head? How much am I thinking about myself? How much am I not really seeing the situation for what it is, or giving myself a chance to find out how this person really feels? Because I think if we don't do that, we end up living on this island with ourselves, isolated, because we run away when things get hard. We run away when we feel scared and don't know how to say what we really want to say because we've never had that dynamic with that person. Great example is parents and friends that you've known from a long time and you've grown and evolved and you haven't really formed that new connection yet. Whereas someone you meet, maybe when you're more healed and more aware, you're more likely to feel comfortable with them. So I personally have found what I guess I've been trying to say this whole time is like how this specifically comes up with people who I've known for a while and who we never took the time to build that depth. So they're still in my life, we're still friends, we're still family, but I still get really triggered and I never tell you why. Or we never have a chance to actually understand each other. And I just see that it ends up exploding at some point, and sometimes that explosion just means, screw this, I can't have them in my life. So it's like, how many misconnections end up happening out of that? And to realize like on this one human life, like we could end up running away from people that we actually truly love and who we really do care about. But we're so hurt that we're blinded by that hurt. And we're blinded by the stories. And I just find that it's a lot more freeing. I have found it freeing in my life recently to express myself to people who I've been scared to in the past and to just say how I feel.
Well, we're learning our whole lives. We're always learning. We're always learning. So we never know the right thing to do or the right thing to say. So when you have these recognitions or when you start to see changes in yourself and the changes in the people you meet and the connections you have, and you're like, that's new. I've not connected deeply like that with people really most of my life. So what's the problem with the past? What's been the problem? Well, it's easy to want to run away from that because it's difficult, but that's not how life is meant to be. And what I mean by that is like, it's so easy to want to walk away from difficult conversations or difficult interactions with people you love really deeply. It's really easy to want to walk away from that. And you can walk away from that. And then if you do walk away from that, you're going to realize that you missed that because there's some relationships that are just irreplaceable. So you realize it's worth it to work on those difficult conversations. It's worth it to extend yourself in those situations because we're always evolving and changing in life. And it's and I think maybe like getting older, by older, I mean late 20s, but for the first time you start to go through a lot of life changes, or people go through different life changes at different times. And there's something really special about connecting with people who have been in your life, who know you before life began when you were younger, or people who have been with you your whole life, your family. And there becomes a time where you're confident enough in yourself to not run away and to face the disconnections or the difficult conversations within your close-knit connections. And that, I think, is where a lot of profound change can happen because you're stacking on an already deep connection. You're stacking an ability to access that depth that has been there through experiences. It's like a cake, like the foundation of the cake is like experiences, a lot of experiences together. And then the second stack of the cake is like being able to access deeper connections within just conversation and understanding and expression of oneself. So being able to have both of those is really rare, unique, and special. So being able to humble yourself in it's not just about you when you're learning to take care of yourself and understand your emotions and understand a level of, I guess, going out the world differently. It's like, it doesn't mean you just got to cut off everyone in your life because that doesn't feel good. The purpose of life, and it's, I guess, up to anyone else who decides purpose of life, but it's like not to run away from the hard stuff because the hard stuff can be the most meaningful, fulfilling stuff.
What a good point, because I'm thinking about like my life in my early 20s and really up into my late 20s where my life felt really shallow. It felt surface level. I just didn't have depth with anyone. I wasn't around people who were capable and who were ready for that. And I think a lot of times, like, we could become so used to being around that environment that we don't know it's possible until we meet a partner or a really good friend or somebody at our yoga studio or a random serendipitous friendship that you're like, oh, whoa, this person sees me and they understand me. And it's possible to have deep and meaningful connection. And I guess if you think about someone's life, like, most of your relationship is formed by your upbringing and your dynamic with your parents and the way that they are able to create a safe space with you. And then after that, I think a lot of it's probably formed by the friendships you have at young ages. And I look at my life and like all the friendships I had, and I wasn't, I don't know, like, I was young. And I guess like I wasn't emotionally capable to have meaningful conversations and meaningful interactions. And I just see how like it makes life a lot more purposeful. And what I was also going to say is like, going back to that time in my life, like, I feel like I kept running away from, like, you gradually in life, there's a time when you start running away from the hard stuff. And that starts to build. And all of a sudden you're 30 years old and you're like, why am I so scared to tell my friend how I really feel? Why am I so scared to talk to my parents and evolve in our relationships and grow? And it's like, right. Because I have not allowed myself to learn the necessary skill of working through difficult things and taking accountability, taking ownership for your emotions, and kind of just like growing up and like not acting like a kid and not having such ridiculous drama. And it's interesting, you see, like, as you grow up, it's like that drama, it can be there forever. People can be emotionally immature at the age of 70 years old. Like, just because you're physically growing in age or growing in your human body does not mean that you're emotionally developing. That's something that you have to choose to do on the side, and it's something that you have to take the time and effort to do. But doing it is so worth it because it allows you to connect with other people.
So what you just said made me think of a point. It made me think of how this journey of emotional maturity, learning to take accountability for your emotions, is one that you generally learn from getting slapped in the face. And you're like, oh, what? I have to do that? Wait, it's not someone else's responsibility for how I feel? Wait, what do you mean by that? They looked at me weird. I'm angry. That's their fault. It's like, it's kind of a shock. It was a shock for me to realize, but I'm hurting so much. This is so painful what they just said to me. And it's like, well, it's an ugly wake-up call to realize that that's your own baggage that's causing you to see someone a certain way. That's your own baggage causing you to perceive this person as attacking you when they're just expressing themselves. It's really uncomfortable to wake up to that, because how do you make sense of, well, why do I feel triggered by this person who's saying all of this stuff to me? It's their fault. It's hard to find a reason, so it's easy to make sense of it by saying it's that person's fault and to get so mad about it. But it's really eye-opening to realize that, well, it's freeing to realize that it's not someone else who's controlling your emotions, that it's something inside of you that you have to work through in order to be free from it. But it's also a really tedious, confusing process that we are just not aware of. Like, everyone in the country, every American, I would say 99% of Americans know what the Super Bowl is. It's everywhere when it happens. There's so many commercials, there's so much money put behind it. Like, imagine if it was just everywhere. Everyone knew, like, you have to take accountability for emotions. Imagine it was a class that was taught in school. Imagine we weren't caught off guard with realizing, oh, this is how you express yourself and create a container so you can express yourself and have real connection and feel comfortable and safe. Like, we were talking to ChatGPT because they have this new dictation model where they dictate back to you, or they respond to you verbally. And we were asking it things about childhood trauma, and it was like 60% of Americans have extreme childhood trauma. And you start to understand all of this comes from our experiences as a kid. And then you look at generational trauma and how it was really just a cycle of something happening to someone and not having the resources or the time or the space or the knowledge to work through it. And it's like it gets passed down to each generation to each generation. And we look at the majority of the country, probably the world, where this is the case. If there's just a lack of knowledge, a lack of understanding, it's not taught in school, it's not widely known. At home is where you learn to love and connect and to understand. You don't know what you don't know until you do know, by the luck of the draw, by exploration, by recognizing it on your own miraculously somehow. And it's just a frustrating answer to have it all go back to the way we were raised, or the experiences we have, and the experiences our parents had that were out of their control, and the experiences their parents had that was out of their control. Because when you put it like that, you're like, oh, there's a whole lot of hurt in the world because people don't have the resources or the capacity or the knowledge to heal it. And I think it is becoming more widely known, and that's exciting. People like Gabor Mate, who spent their whole lives doing research and work that have profound findings to validate this, and not as a crutch to victimize, but as a resource to move and grow and become resilient, to have the capacity to move beyond it. And I think that's a really exciting conversation, because no one deserves to be suffering. All bad in this world comes from suffering or a lack of knowing how to take care of oneself. Because you wouldn't do something if you weren't in pain. And because the process of becoming aware of why you do things that hurt other people because you are in pain, becoming aware of that pain, you can live an entirely different life. You can live an entirely different life. And my favorite Christmas movie makes me think of the Scrooge, and how he was able to form connection, true connection with people, to where he'd shut everyone out his entire life because he was so hurt from, I think, his business partner dying, or all like a accumulation of things. So his heart was so cold. And he was a business owner, and he was a crude business owner. He made a lot of money. It's not until he forms a connection, a bond with extended family member, that he breaks, and he doesn't have to live in his own suffering. And the profound effect he has on everyone else's life, because he chooses to not be in suffering because he gets connection from others, is a beautiful portrayal that no one has to suffer. We all just want connection, and getting that connection starts with identifying our own needs that we need to meet.
Yeah, I think a big recognition from this conversation is that there's times when we can be so cut off from our loving nature and our empathetic nature because we have so much hurt and so much pain that's built on top of us that gets in the way of us connecting. That anytime, well, it's interesting because now I'm thinking so much of the hurt that we carry is due to interpersonal relationships. Because this whole life that we have, we're interacting with other human beings, which is so funny to think about because they're just other versions of ourselves in the species that we're somehow aware of. And we're all here, and like, it's just so interesting how I think back to just so many experiences, like from a very young kid, having a experience from like, that person must not like me, or that person's mad at me. Like not ever knowing how anyone actually felt, that I created so many stories to fill in that uncertainty. It's like, if we don't know what someone feels, that's a lot of uncertainty. So instead of sitting in the, I have no idea how they actually feel, and not what their anger is saying, not what is getting projected, not them freaking out and screaming, because that's not who a person is. Anger is an experience that we all have, and pain is an experience, but at our core, they become self mechanisms of defensiveness and to keep us safe. Mm-hmm. We're just trying to keep ourselves safe all the time. And I just think that when from your whole life, you're just trying to keep yourself safe and literally survive so you don't die, that it's so easy when you're filling in that gap of uncertainty of how somebody feels to top it off with so many stories of, oh, they hate me, they don't like me, I'm less than them, this person's mad at me. And then you're halfway through your life and you're still angry at your coworkers, or you're fighting with this person all the time, or you're always mad, or you're always triggered. And it's like, We never took the time to form deeper relationships that were safe and could validate to us that all the shit we've internalized was never true. So much of it, all these internalizations we had about how people viewed us and why we're so hurt by all these things in the past, if we don't have a chance to be in a safe space to heal that, that's always going to cloud our interpersonal relationships. And we'll never have a fair chance at, oh, this person's looking at me like that because they love me and not because they want to hurt me.
So I can share a personal experience with this. When thinking of taking accountability to change your interpersonal relationships. So in one example, I could be in an experience where, and this happens sometimes, where I innately feel just unsafe. I feel like someone's out to get me. I feel like someone who's in front of me who could be deeply caring about me. I could feel like they have contempt or resentment or anger, or they want to hurt me verbally. They want to yell at me. I can easily see that in the person in front of me who's talking to me. And the person in front of me could be interchanged. It's not unique to the person. So what that teaches me is that it's something that is inside of me that's causing my distortion of someone. Like, this is the exact example of someone could be sitting in front of you saying they love you and care about you so much, and you could be like, why are you trying to hurt me? Because you might see love as hurt because you've been hurt in the past in loving relationships. So where I draw this back to like my example is that for me, I've been able to recognize that I oftentimes have this initial story that someone is out to get me, or they're not going to trust, or that they're just going to hurt me ultimately. If I let them get too close, they're going to hurt me. They're going to leave me. And by being able to recognize that really uncomfortable truth, it's helped me create space between it. And truly not the first time, but an experience I had that really helped me was when I went to this authentic relating class, where I walked in and I saw the facilitator, and we had to sit close face to face and look into each other's eyes and start to note things. And walking into this made me profoundly uncomfortable. And I made the decision to shut my eyes. And at the end, I came out and I viewed him as an entirely different person. At first, I was like, this person's trying to get me. I feel hurt. I feel scared. Why are they trying to take something from me? What are they trying to do? And by respecting my own boundaries and shutting my eyes and being validated for my own needs in that experience, it felt safe and loving. It changed my story I had about people. And it changed the way I experienced my connection to this person. It changed my entire way I acted. It changed everything. It changed everything. So I guess what I'm trying to say is that it's easy to project how you feel onto someone and assume that that's how they feel. Whether it's your hurt, your baggage, your insecurities, you have no idea what they could be feeling. So if you are able to simply note how you're feeling and express that and debunk maybe the story you have of them, and they're able to debunk the story they have of you, we are getting all of the nonsense out of the way for true connection. So much of the connection we have is just caught up in our minds. It's not real connection. Real connection happens from being in the present moment. So we never can assume that what our mind is telling us about someone is what is true, because if we listen, we might miss out on the true love and connection we have in front of us. If we're listening to the pain or the hurt or the stories or the insecurities, it's us who prevents ourselves from loving. And it really is us who prevent ourselves from being allowed to be loved. And love is at the heart of connection. So I'm just thinking out loud because I'm figuring this all out too. I don't know the answers to connection. These have been my experiences, and there sure as hell will be more to come. I'm sure the connections I have now at 28 will not be the same connections I have when I'm age 60. Like, there's never an answer. It's really just seeing the change and growth within yourself and learning to understand what it is that you want. How can you change? Where did you start and where are you now? And naturally, my head keeps going to me being in my early 20s and like going to networking events in New York City and being so thinking about myself, so insecure, so fearful, and assuming that everyone is better than me, everyone has something more interesting than me. When in reality, that's just my insecurities getting projected onto other people. If you get so caught up thinking about yourself, you're just going to live your life through that tunnel vision. And it's just so interesting because it's really encouraging to be able to recognize that just because you're having these experiences or these thoughts, assuming a story about someone else, about yourself, doesn't mean they're true. And the more you realize, the more you can push it away and have space to take an action that is not a direct result of what your thoughts are telling you. In doing that creates space to have a connection outside of the inherent dynamic that's created when two people come together and are listening to their conditionings and their thoughts. When you're able to recognize your own conditionings and thoughts and push them aside and actually question what's here in this connection right now, you give the opportunity to the other person to do the same. And that's where you get to have the option to have a true connection that's not based out of your baggage.
And that's kind of why we're doing all this work, right? Like, it's interesting, you can have these awakenings about the universe and we're all one and we're everything, but there comes a time where all this work we're doing, like, you put into practice. You recognize that we're on a planet and we're all connected and everyone else is just another version of you. But you also come back to life, the life we're living in, and realize it is challenging to do certain things. It's challenging to have certain conversations. It's hard to connect. It's hard to say how you really feel. And becoming aware of all that difficulty, it is exciting because it's like, wow, the things that were once so scary to me, like telling a friend I haven't talked to in a few years, like, I've been reflecting on our friendship and I miss you. I think I was caught up in my head a lot when we used to hang out, and I've grown a lot and I'm curious where you're at. Or talking to a parent and saying how I really feel about a situation, or just being open and honest, because it's really easy to run away and to avoid and justify that because we're hurt. And a lot of the time it's like just being hurt becomes this like giant defensive mechanism that keeps us isolated and alone because we can't handle we can't handle it. We can't handle talking through it. But we look to that other person and say, hey, it's all your fault. It's all your fault. But how about looking to yourself? And how about asking, how am I playing a role in this? Because everything in life, every relationship in life is two-sided. And that's how real growth and involvement goes. And that's how we're able to live a more peaceful life without so many perceived problems, because you realize that so many of those problems was just a thought your mind was creating about, I won't be able to work this out, but that was just fear of actually being honest. Being self-honest with yourself and being honest with the other person. It's actually pretty damn easy when you try.
Well, it makes life easier when you try. Getting there is not necessarily easy, but it's possible and it's a challenge, but everyone's able to get there. But it makes life a lot easier. It makes life a lot easier. Because you're dealing what's in reality, or you're able to be in reality and look at what you're going through emotionally and say, okay, I feel all that. That's all here. But I don't have to take all my actions based off of that. And that's the exact space where we can connect. And I think that's a beautiful thing. And I see how important that is, because like that is at the core of life, is connecting with others and connecting with ourselves. And there's just a lot less loneliness and hurt when we're able to have true connection. Like that is a necessity. So I think that I've enjoyed the journey of this conversation because it's relevant in my life. And it's nice to just share my experiences because it helps me see the importance of this. And it validates the importance of being able to communicate in the investment of time that I've put into this podcast and put into taking accountability and put into this relationship that we have. It's just nice to reflect on these kind of hidden in plain sight conversations of we all have connections. So what are the reality of our connections? Because we can so get used to our connections not being something that is deeply meaningful. And if they're not, then that means that we must not have a meaningful connection with ourselves. And that's something that we always take into our own hands, or that's something that we can and have to take into our own hands. And that's something that we can all do. So it's an encouraging fact that you can change the connection with yourself and change the connections with those in your life and just feel more love. So on that note, we can close the conversation. So we appreciate all of you listening, and I'm just going to keep asking. We're looking to get 100 5-star reviews on Spotify. We're at 85 right now, and we'd really appreciate if you could take just a few seconds to go to that Spotify app and give us hopefully a 5-star review. So we will see you when we see you at the next conversation.
Thanks for joining us on this journey of working through the inner world, expressing, and coming back to the present moment. Appreciate you being here, and we'll talk to you soon.